You might be wondering why I've released a video with this premise when I already released the Go-Won problem. And the truth is, I'm doing this because while being the same issue, orbits typically see them as separate or fail to realize one of them at all. Just like before, I want to give you guys the blow-by-blow, and I think it's important that I do that because there were things I didn't cover when I was concerned only with the underexposed half. And while I could offer the same disclaimer, that this is about more Luna members than just HeeJin, it is definitely, positively, 99% about HeeJin. Some people really have just completely failed to realize the extent of what's going on. As a forewarning, any comments whining about how mean I'm being to HeeJin or how orbits hate HeeJin will be deleted without a second glance. Nobody ever says or even implies that the unfair skew in Luna's songs is her fault, and nobody ever has. We're not morons, we know HeeJin doesn't control who sings what, and we shouldn't have to keep reminding you of this. So we start with Vivid, the very first Luna solo, released in 2016 by barely 16 years old HeeJin, which some orbits are quick to tell you was the worst selling album of its year, so that we can all awe at how far Luna has come. After HeeJin came HyeJin, who as documented kind of suffered being in her shadow, and then members Hassel and HyeJin. At this point, BlackBerry went to great lengths to make sure previously introduced members were involved in the currently promoting members single. HeeJin had a duet with HyeJin on the second single, sang a trio with HyeJin and Hassel on the third single, and sang a second duet with HyeJin on HyeJin's single. This means that by the time Vivi rolled around, and the prior members got a cameo on her music video, that as a consequence, HeeJin has been singing, dancing, and appearing by far the most. Not that I really have any issue with I'll Be There or The Carol, it probably wasn't necessary to produce a copy song of My Melody purely to include her, but I digress. The debut of Luna 1/3 generally brought yet more HeeJin prominence, as we have documented. But now we get to the parts people don't really consider. After the end of the 1/3 era, there was really no reason to expect HeeJin to continue appearing, and yet she did. Kim Lip was supposed to feature in an alternate rap on Jinsoul's solo that would be released for a view goal. She was nervous, so Hassel also recorded one, but HeeJin was so eager to try out a girl crush concept that she asked to record one as well, and they ended up going with hers. Unfortunately, only the one Luna TV remains as evidence of this, and odds are we simply aren't ever going to hear the other two raps. Whether she succeeded at this or not tends to be a matter of opinion, but the general consensus is that her rap definitely wasn't on par with Jinsoul's. The spare spotlight got thrown to HyeJin, Hassel, and HyeJin in subsequent Odd Eye Circle works, and Vivi in early YYXY ones. HeeJin and HyeJin were busy with Mix 9 for quite a while, and while it can't really be linked to BlackBerry Creative's faulty presentation issues this time, everyone will agree that editing the show to make HyeJin look bad and thus lose popularity in comparison to HeeJin was a dick move. What can be said, however, is that HeeJin was definitely still promoting throughout 2017, including Mix 9, Woomana, and several commercial deals. These include Innisfree, Law of Creation, Hanyul, and High Cut, and those just in 2017. Enter the YYXY era. Eve debuts with Vivi and Cherry making cameos in a solo video, and while Chu is shooting Heart Attack, the three of them basically take 10 minutes to re-record The Carol and shoot a lyric video for it. While I can definitely appreciate throwing this sort of bone to the most underrated and underappreciated members of the prior two subunits, I think giving Eve more lines than the other two combined kind of undercuts that, and was not a good sign going forward. 2018 arrives. While YYXY are promoting, Kim Lip, by now a well-established and popular member, features on Go-Won's B-side Seesaw, while HeeJin features on Olivia Hayes' B-side Rosie, again as a rapper. Shortly before this release, she got signed on as a model advertising cosmetics. Then Woomana came back, and then she did a commercial for LG. The point here is, even if you simply exclude everything that isn't an official Luna release, viewers have still had no time away from HeeJin to really miss her. Now comes the part people actually get mad about. What happened when the group debuted was unexpected, to say the least. While people tried to rationalize the extreme skew in singing time and center time and screen time, it was generally thought to be catering to the fact that some members were more popular than others. This did not really explain HeeJin, who, while far and away the most popular member of her subunit, was nowhere near the stand magnet Kim Lip and Jinsoul were. For some reason, every line distribution I could find counted the and the towards HeeJin's total, which isn't really fair to her as voice clips inserted into the instrumental backtrack shouldn't be counted, but no matter which way you slice it, she still sings for roughly 24 seconds on Favorite and 21 seconds on High High, which is not cool at all when the other rest of her subunit plus HyeJin got almost nothing. Between her, Kim Lip, Jinsoul, and Eve, things were heavily weighed away from half the group the entire album through, for reasons it was difficult to discern. Even the B-sides for which there was no music video or choreography continued to push these members, HeeJin especially, and stifle the rest. Now that we've had time to adjust to a rotating concept, one would have thought, looking back, that Plus Plus at least would have featured 1/3 the most, not just HeeJin. The point I want to make here is that these specific members were being favored not only over the heads of the other members, but often to their exclusion. No, that's not HeeJin's fault, of course, but the lack of presence members like Gowon and DV have is, and should be recognized as, directly in proportion to how much overexposure is heaped on these other members. You can't overexpose without underexposing. XX, I think, is where things started to really skew. It's 2019, and LOONA have been well established now that they've debuted. With no official positions, there was no real reason to expect HeeJin to continue a role as center or face of the group. And yet she did. I want to stress this. Nowadays, it might seem obvious that HeeJin is supposed to be the center, the face, the main dancer, the main vocal, and the main rapper all in one. But back when Butterfly came out, this was not really the case. True, the infamous skew of the plus plus era had balanced out quite a bit, but there was still a noticeable, intentional focus on HeeJin at this point that, as far as anyone that had been keeping track of LOONA would be aware, did not really line up with how they'd been promoting. At least if you only looked at the surface level. On the surface level, the XX album does appear to make drastic changes to the way LOONA is being promoted, even if they basically left Gowon out to dry. Even if, upon hearing the songs, things seemed more balanced, BBC exercised abundant care to almost never let certain members, HeeJin, Kimlip, Eve, and now Chu, recede too much. We can no longer at this point say that this is simply appealing to the fanbase. If anything, XX is the era where that became fully inverted, with the fanbase instead being led along by the content given to them. HeeJin, Eve, Chu, and Olivia Hay biases will continue to blossom, and later explode in future albums. HeeJin continued to promote throughout this year, a commercial for Heimart, plus an appearance on King of Masked Singer, and a formal Halloween cover of Sunmi's Full Moon. So, let's just catalog so far. In the scope of LOONA's pre-debut work, HeeJin has been doing far more than anyone else and has never really been inactive or unpromoted. In the scope of LOONA's post-debut work, HeeJin has been excessively overexposed. In the scope of everything outside an active LOONA music video promoting period, HeeJin has had the majority of gigs. This is all just from a glance at our wiki page, mind you, and not extraneous content that nonetheless advertises LOONA, like that makeup promotion she did with Kimlip, and that Sweets Shop tour she did with Chu. Whenever there is a camera rolling, HeeJin is on it. Contrast this with any other member of LOONA, and you see a sharp discrepancy in exactly how many citations they achieve. This is, in fact, really bad, because BBC isn't just failing to let other members sing, they're refusing to let them grow their careers. 2019, a very difficult year for LOONA, passes. 2020 comes, bringing the disheartening news of Hostle's official hiatus due to anxiety, but at least there is a comeback. And what a comeback it was! LOONA goes full ferocity, girl crush rebellion, and the aggravating skew from Plus Plus which seemed to die out in XX returns in full force for Hash. 99% of the lines on this album are sung by HeeJin, Kimlip, Eve, and Chu, with HeeJin again shining above the rest, and again to the exclusion of select members like Vivi, Gowon, and Yeojin. Some people accuse this of being done at the behest of Lee Soo-man, the biggest producer in K-pop, period, who had worked on the album. I flatly disagree with this, as my problems with the Hash album are too identical to that of the previous albums to be laid at his feet. This is firmly a BBC issue. As I said in the Gowon Problem video, this is straight up hypocrisy. You cannot seriously release a song about women breaking past barriers and defying those who would hold them back, while doing everything in your power to try and make people forget certain members of the girl group exist. BBC at this point have composed and choreographed the album's tracks to such an extent that it almost appears they regret creating a 12-member group, because maybe 6 of them actually carry the songs. The overexposure continues, with LOONA releasing covers for Super Junior's Sorry Sorry and Hong Jin Young's Love Battery. Jin-Sol and Chu release OSTs, while HeeJin stars in a music video, and Eve becomes the host for Fact and Star. As of Why Not and its album Midnight, this issue has slightly abated with regards to common offenders Kimlip, Eve, and Chu, but doubled down with HeeJin. The title track, Why Not in particular, is egregiously focused on her to a bizarre and handicapping degree, with her getting 3 raps, abundant center time, and a high note too. Why Not is definitely the worst, but I did not miss how the album is chock full of raps, and HeeJin is involved in every single one. Blockberry at this point do not seem interested in delivering musical content at all if it doesn't start, continue, and end with HeeJin. While PTT, the most recent comeback as of this video, still has some of this problem as well, Why Not represents the zenith of it, and in my opinion it seriously drags down a very good title track. It's always possible to make a case for HeeJin singing less, purely for what would be fair, but in Why Not especially, the case could be made that HeeJin's abundance of lines really don't suit her, and don't sound good with her voice, which comes as a consequence of the odd compulsion Blockberry has to place her on the spotlight no matter what. And I will say this for Kimlip and Eve, in that while BBC may market them more on vocals than they deserve, they still acknowledge that these two are mostly dance-oriented. They refuse to make any such concession for HeeJin, who eats and eats and eats, whether it's long notes, high notes, complex choreo centers, or raps. all of them on the same damn song usually, and none of which she really needs to be doing, especially not over and over and over again in a manner that implies she is the foremost talent in every ability Luna possesses. It does not matter whether you stan HeeJin or not. By this point, you should have been well aware that this was extraordinarily unfair and unwise marketing, and have been willing to speak up on that matter. But very few orbits were. Yes, the B-side voice is all about throwing bones to Vivi and Gowon, at least as far as the choreography goes, but no one is fooled by this anymore. We've been dealing with this for too long and we're not falling for the same old crumbs. We are now 3-ish months into the comeback centering on the 4th mini-album And, led by title track Paint the Town. The album as a whole can be said to continue the trend set by So What, where HeeJin continues to dominate with peers Kim Lip and Chu. Perhaps not as extreme as at Midnight, but this concession is insufficient to say the least. We also now have a subunit release of HeeJin, Kim Lip, and Eve, with Jinsol thrown in for good measure, and I do not have it in me to expect similar and fairly promoted content from the rest of the members. I honestly could not tell you exactly why this happens, or what HeeJin did to make her so favored in the eyes of those in charge of the Luna releases. To this day, there's a lot of conflicting ideas about who actually divvies up the lines, the songwriters and composers versus the audio editors, Jaden versus Monotree, etc. The fact remains, though, that the decision to continue pushing HeeJin has led to a decline in the quality of the songs and her performances of them. Oh, you don't believe me? Here, let me explain. I'm going to do something audacious here and wager that most orbits these days don't actually know what HeeJin's voice sounds like. I'll play some of her better, earlier performances now so you can tell for yourself. HeeJin's voice sits squarely in the alto, mezzo-alto range. But most orbits don't know that because what they remember is this. They are making her sing in a lower register than is natural for her, and that's why her voice keeps creaking, both in recorded sessions and in live stages. Note the contrast in Jinsol's half of the second verse of Why Not versus HeeJin's half. One sounds a lot more natural than the other. This issue has probably gone as unrecognized as it has because of HeeJin's relatively deep speaking voice, which orbits continue to stan, laugh about, and make memes over. Unfortunately, most orbits haven't realized that a speaking voice and a singing voice aren't the same thing. I don't think that's why BBC do this though, because BBC have proven deaf to orbit desires before, and will continue to do so. You could say that BBC wants HeeJin to have a piece of every pie, and that she gets deep tones suited to Hyunjin or Jinsol, rap suited to Jinsol or Olivia Haye, high notes suited to Hassel, and long notes suited to Chu. Jinsol in particular is a curious case of having to share a role in a group if you look at the cross-section of how often they sing the same lines or verses. Suffice it to say that even without a pre-debut project that was intended to exemplify individuality and uniqueness, you're not really going to create an amazing singer by having her try and be every other singer. Go on any line distribution video and you will witness the infighting and the excuses given. There's the typical bleeding that BlackBerry hands the lines out according to who's most popular, which doesn't make sense because they essentially control who is the most popular with how they market them. HeeJin isn't the most popular because she's had the same chances given to her as the rest and gained a deserved audience. She's the most popular because she is made to sing, dance, and rap the most, and the audience absorbs what they are given. That's it. Quite a common one is to simply put one's foot down and deliver what one thinks is the blunt truth, that some girls are better performers than others, and that it simply makes sense to give the most capable members the most lines. Or that the lines are obviously distributed according to who will best deliver them. That regardless of what the word is on official positions, vocalists like Vivi are simply weaker and are thus given what they merit. This is beyond stupid for a variety of reasons, and I think I can use an analogy to make you understand why. In, say, the anime community, you have the age-old arguments over subbing versus dubbing, in which you find a lot of people, by the thousands, loftily demeaning English dubs while praising the Japanese dubs as superior performances. A good 99% of these people are English speakers with no knowledge of Japanese at all, so they're talking out of their asses. It is factually a baseless assertion. If you cannot speak Japanese fluently, conversationally, then you are absolutely, irrefutably deaf to what is and isn't a good Japanese performance. A person could be delivering the clunkiest, most laughable voice acting that native Japanese speakers have ever heard, and you would not know the difference. It's kind of the same way with K-pop and music in general. You can insist all day and night that Kim Lip, Eve, Chu, or HeeJin were obviously the best ones to handle the lines given to them, but you're stating something you can't possibly know one way or another because you haven't heard anyone but Kim Lip, Eve, Chu, or HeeJin sing that line. You cannot get a good read of who was the best to sing what line if all you have is a single released version of that song. Come to think of it, producers themselves are not able to make that call without having heard every version of the lines either, although I'm sure more than a few of them do when recording, and we should lambaste them for that. Left with nothing but cold, hard, observable, empirical fact, the one who should be singing and dancing the most is HeeJin, because she trained for 3 years, while most of the other girls in the group trained for less than 2. But the products published for our consumption obviously do not align to this standard, do they? But more to the point, this assumes that the lines sung by individual members are entirely different, rather than harmonious pieces meant to fit together into a singular whole. How exactly does this hold water when the same lines in different verses will be sung by one member at one point, and 3 members later on? 365 is a really good example of this. The best example happens at the very beginning too. The first part of the first verse is split between Cherry and Olivia, but then HeeJin sings the entire next line herself. The third line is sang entirely by Kim Lip. The final line of the first verse goes right back to being split, this time between Yeojin, Gowon, and Vivi. It's a very ugly, transparent tactic because you can easily identify pauses between longer lines where the less favored member is singing it, it wouldn't be a single line, but rather split up among them. It serves no purpose and improves the song in no way. It's done simply to shill certain numbers and mute others. And this is not the only time they do this. The Luna discography is chock full of songs where you can identify lines that would definitely be split if HeeJin and less often Kim Lip, Chu, or Eve were not singing them. Fall Again is only the most recent example. There's also common arguments that go completely off the rails, such as that because HeeJin waited the longest to debut, she thus deserves the lines that have been given to her. This one, above all, actually makes me want to punch people, because every single angle you can approach it from is wrong. Angle number 1. No one deserves to be marketed ahead of anyone else purely because they waited a longer time to debut. Again, HeeJin waited almost as long as she did, or even longer considering their training periods, but obviously Blockberry do not feel this warrants a higher rate of exposure. Angle number 2. HeeJin did not spend the 2 years after her solo recording session doing nothing but waiting. As I have exhaustively recapped over the course of this video, she was actively and consistently promoting by far the most of the girls throughout the entire pre-debut project. Nothing changed, the situation only exacerbated. Angle number 3. Waiting by itself is not a meritorious action. Performance is. Putting concept and presentation to the side for one moment, HeeJin's solo did not contain a rap of any sort, a complex and difficult choreography, or any long notes or high notes. In short, nothing of what she's been doing since debut. Neither did most of the subunit songs. Viewers that are confused by how things changed by the time of August 2018 have every right to be, because they were under the impression the singles would display the idols' talents in their best light, and so what they got from Luna, the 12-member group, was obviously not in line with what they got from the Luna individuals. Nowhere throughout the pre-debut project were we given the impression that HeeJin would be all that Blockberry cared about, which increasingly seems to be the case. I think if orbits collectively recognized the issue, and maybe demanded they shine a lot of the spotlight on her, not a little, a lot, things might improve a bit. Although I'm not sure what their grudge against Vivi and Gowon is, we know they do at least pretend to listen when enough noise is made. I think No More HeeJin and I Like HeeJin But needs to trend worldwide as soon as the next teaser comes out. Otherwise, the cycle is going to continue. And if you are a HeeJin stan watching this video, do your part. Excuses and favoritism have made this fandom an unbearable place to be. We're all sick of effectively being told that our well-meaning and honest complaints about unfair treatment somehow means that we hate HeeJin or have some double standard against her. If you are a HeeJin stan, it's time you worked with us instead of stamping your foot telling us to stop complaining. It sucks that videos like this have to be made, and it sucks even worse that they often don't mean anything in the long run. But I'm still going to yell about these issues until they are corrected, or until someone personally puts a stop to them. Do your part. Find your own way to tell Blockberry we want something different.